This podcast is certified fresh. Freshmediaworks.com.
Looking to boost your company's marketing? Look no further than Fresh MediaWorks. Podcasting is the best way to promote your brand and increase your customer base. You can create your own show, be a guest on other podcasts, or advertise on existing podcasts to reach a valuable audience. Don't wait. Start elevating your marketing game today with Fresh MediaWorks. Call now, 713-269-4620, or find us online at freshmediaworks.com/podcasting.
Hello and welcome everyone to another insightful episode of Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz. I'm Bob Bertucci, here with fellow Master Coaches Mick Haley, Tom Hibert, and Jim Stone. Today we have a special lineup with Max Miller of Mintonette Volleyball Club and Mike Lingenfelter of Munciana Volleyball Club. And we're going to kind of delve into the club volleyball scene and then get a close-up on that for the next 40 minutes or so. Welcome, Max and Mike. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, let's dive right into our questions. Max and Mike, it's President's Weekend approaching. Can you tell us, about the events that your club will be competing in? Max, why don't you go first?
Sure. So, we've got 50 teams. 32 of those will be out this weekend. 16 are going to be up in Cleveland at the North Coast Cup. And then we have 8 out in President's Day Cup in St. Louis. And then the top 8 teams will be going to Triple Crown out in Kansas City.
Our schedule is pretty similar, Bob. Our open teams will all go to Kansas City for Triple Crown. And then we collaborate on a weekend event, a President's Day weekend event in Detroit with Far Out and Michigan Elite. So, all in all, we'll probably have about 70 teams in Detroit. And then just like Max, 8 of our teams will be in Kansas City.
It's really interesting, this whole club business, but as club directors, how do you approach these non-qualifying events? Are there different purposes for attending these for the different teams and the different levels of teams?
I think, yeah. I do, Bob. I mean, Mick, I think that one of the things that I spend a lot of time kind of prepping our families, because this event in Kansas City, you can go get mauled in a hurry. You start off in power pools. That may not go well. So some of these teams aren't used to losing. And so when we talk, we make this more about process than results. We kind of make it a barometer event. I'm very aware that it's used for seeding and whatnot down the line. But this is our first real time to get out and let our kids be seen by the college coaches, but also for us to kind of get a feel for what our kids are going to do under fire. And so we preface this with, we want to go out and do wonderful things. But at the end of the day, this is about figuring out who we are and what we need to do to get better.
How does that work with you, Max?
We're the same. I think for Triple Crown, it's one of those things where the top coaches in the country, there's over 300 Division I schools there, right? All representing their universities. And it's hard to be on your A game in the middle of February when you're going till the end of June and sometimes July. But majority of our teams outside of our top 8, this weekend is used so that coaches can give us their lineups and their starting lineups for what they see is going to be their starting lineup for the rest of the year when it comes to qualifying season. We kind of break up our season in 3 small sessions, if you will, or segments, if you will. Preseason, which ends this weekend, qualifying season, then national prep and nationals. So I will say, the 6 teams that I have, 2 years ago, they went 0-3 at the Triple Crown. they won the national championship. And then last year at 15s, they went 0-3 on day one again, and then again won the national championship. So, like Mike said, you can get your bell rung if you're not on point. And I think traditionally for us, we've just not had enough game reps to be ready like the Texas teams typically have by this time of the year.
That kind of leads into my question for both of you. You know, it sounds as if both of your clubs send your top 8 to Triple Crown. Is that the way it is nationwide? And is that, you know, an event that all the top teams in the country go to? And can it, my other part of that question was, can it be dangerous to go into something that strong that quickly?
Well, I think that, you know, it is, Tom, to answer your question, everybody sends their best. And by and large, you've got almost every major club. Now, there's a couple outliers, but almost every major club is involved. It is a little bit dangerous. You know, one of the biggest pet peeves I've always had with club volleyball is that, you know, we've always really put these events down that force people to try to, I don't know, reach their apex in February and March, you know, which makes zero sense to me. You know, I've had teams win Triple Crown and lose national championships. Much like Max, I've had teams lose Triple Crown and win national championships. But at the end of the day, you know, I think it's only dangerous if you approach it with the wrong mentality. I think if people go in there with this win at all costs mentality, I don't think that I don't think it's going to be the event for you. I think you go in there with the learn at all cost mentality, and I think you got a shot. And you know, there's a lot of people that can teach me lessons there. There's an awful lot of good teams, and as I alluded, probably the greatest showing. You know, our sport divided so dramatically several years ago. And it was kind of a JVA USA thing, but it's really a USA AAU thing. That division has made it almost impossible for the best to be around the best on a regular basis, and Triple Crown has afforded everybody that opportunity. So it's a tremendous event, but you do have to go in with the right mindset and understand that it's February.
Yeah, I mean, talking to Jared yesterday, he has said, who runs Triple Crown, his group has got the 86 of the top 100 clubs at this one event. And, you know, if we didn't have to, you know, stress about qualifying in our part of the country where our parents are just kind of used to that, you know, Triple Crowns once a month would be ideal to go and learn and figure out what we need to do better before the end of the year versus having a lot of pressure, like Mike mentioned, in March and April when it comes to qualifying season.
A question for both of you, obviously. You know, you're both heading towards how well can we do at the end of the year. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, Mike, you traditionally go to AAUs and Max goes more to the USAV event. Can you guys, you know, tell the viewers kind of how do you make the decision of I'm going to AAUs or I'm going to junior nationals by the USAV? Are there components for each event that you feel, you know, appeals to your or falls in line with your club philosophy, and why do you choose to go one and not the other? So Mike, maybe you can lead off with that.
Yeah, you know, historically that came down to chasing qualifiers. You know, one of our last years in this, people were you would show up at a qualifier and people had scouted out what would be the weakest qualifier so that you could go and qualify, and people were playing in 4 and 5 qualifiers. And we just had made the decision that it was one year where we had qualified really late. I believe it may have been Northern Lights, and we had about a 1 month turnaround or so before we had to, you know, get to nationals and set and get rooms and get everything organized. And so we made the call early on that we were going to do AAU because it was a determined spot. We knew where our season would start, where our season would finish. It was easier on our families. It was easier on our budget because we weren't chasing. Both events are tremendous events. You know, every year somebody tells me about the USA and how, you know, these guys are so much better than AAU and vice versa. You know, what we've decided now because I do believe in both events. We're going to play in MEQs. It's too good of a tournament to not play in. It's in my backyard. We're going to play in MEQs, and if we qualify, we'll do both. We'll do both, and I think it's, if you're trying to do what's right by the customer and the kid, you need to do that. It is the best possible volleyball that I could offer up. Our teams that don't qualify will continue to do AAU as always, and we'll move forward with that mindset. But we're only going to play in the one qualifier.
Yeah, for us, we've traditionally gone to Windy City and MEQ because it's so close to us. We pick a third one to go to, and typically we have to fly to it. There are clubs out there that are doing 4 or 5 qualifiers, and they're looking to see what the weakest one is to get out. And to me, that financially doesn't make sense for us. I always look at the quality of matches versus the amount of money our parents are going to spend, and then we try to make the best decision from a schedule standpoint. But it's traditionally been Windy City and MEQ for us. Over the last couple of years, we have done AAUs. We've talked about doing AAUs when time allows for the 15, 16, and 17 ones teams that are recruitable age groups, just to be seen by maybe a different group, as well as a second look from other colleges that attend both.
Max and Mike, both of you have had remarkable success with your clubs over the years. If you were advising a less successful club director, or maybe a new club just starting out, what would you say is the key to your success? Max, why don't you take that one first?
Yeah. So for me, when I first started, I didn't know what way was up and down. So I looked around to see what the best clubs were, and Mike and Ron at Kiva let us come into their gyms, whether it was us there to take notes and watch practice, or bring teams to get trained and learn how to train and be around better athletes and a better system that had already been developed. Now, every 2 years, I take a flight to somewhere in the country and get into somebody's gym for 2 or 3 days. Same can be said for us. We have 4 or 5 clubs a year that come in to our gym and just watch practices, ask questions, things like that. So I do think our coaches have a constant culture of learning, and I think that's why we've been able to do so well by our kids and our families.
I tell you, that's Max. It's amazing watching what Max has done, because I do remember Bob Max coming into our gym asking a million questions. And, one of the real oddities of this podcast, and the last time I saw all of the master coaches together was probably in a hotel lobby or a hotel conference room in Lexington when the AVCA was invented. And there's a cooler of beer in the back of the room, and people were spouting about how we were going to create this great coaching mechanism. I snuck in with Tom Pingle and hid in the back of the room, but little be known that Max and I both are Lexingtonians. We're both from Lexington, Kentucky. So that beautiful moment of the birth of the AVCA also was probably where Max and I started getting going. But to answer your question, I think passion. I think that passion for learning, but also passion for teaching. One of the things about Munciana that's always been really special is it was all teachers. It was all teachers. For those that were blessed enough to play for Coach Shondell, he was a teacher first and foremost. And almost every single coach at one time that was in this program was a teacher professionally. And so the passion to learn is one. The passion to teach I think, has always been a separator. If I had to pick the wild card from what I've done and what we've done, Max hit on it. It's been really the passion to share what we love, much like what you guys are doing. But I think the guys that are having the most success are the ones that share the most, care the most, and are willing to give the most.
Don't like to have the tail wag the dog any more than the college coaches don't like that to happen either. When I was college coach and Triple Crown was starting, they paid us to come to that event. They gave us hotel rooms, meaning college coaches.
Yeah.
And they really set that event up to be something special for the top group. And there were supposed to only be 40 teams, I think, invited. And everybody in the country got mad at them. It's like when I coached the national team and I offered an open tryout and I kept 16 and cut 45, and I had 45 people mad at me and 16 people happy. And that's how Triple Crown got big. But the whole thing about venture capital groups getting involved in youth sports is where we're at. And Triple Crown was really smart to know what would draw you guys to the event, and that was recruiting. Now, how much is venture capital entities, how much are these guys showing interest in acquiring clubs? There was a movement 2 or 3 years ago where everybody was getting an offer, and there was conglomerates that were trying to gather groups of clubs. I suspect because of these events. We just talked about all the events you guys are participating in, where you're sending your teams. And those events, whether they're the top 40 teams or the bottom 40 teams, they all drive revenue. They drive parents. They drive all kinds of things. Is there still a movement to acquire clubs and consolidate so that you can control events and presumably increase profits or lower costs, which I would hope would be the reason for a lot of these programs?
I think yes. I do think yes, Mick. I think there's still interest. Max would tell you as well. I think it's slowed. You referenced 2 or 3 years ago. It was hot and heavy. It has slowed a bit. There's still some merger and acquisitions going on, but they're few and farther in between. They're a little more quiet than what they were. You're 100% correct in the sense that it's about events. I think that volleyball is really odd. We spent all of these years complaining that there was that people weren't putting money into volleyball. That we couldn't garner the interest of all of these money entities or financial entities, and then all of a sudden, people start putting it in, and now our complaint is oftentimes that there's too many money people involved in our game. I don't know if it slows. I do think that people are going to want to acquire events. I think Triple Crown, proved that it's a lucrative business. If you open up any magazine, they continue to talk about youth sports and what a burgeoning business it is, and $1 billion industry. So I think you're always going to have those guys. But to answer your question, current interests, I think it's slowing, to be honest. Max?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the trend is definitely on a downward slope. I haven't heard very much from Three Step, which is now has Munciana. I am in talks with Love and seeing a little bit more about what they're about, even though I was, at least what they tell me, one of the 3 clubs that they reached out to about 4 years ago. I think for me, we partnered with some people to be able to run some tournaments, and I got into the tournament business late, but obviously Mike is right on. It's just big money. And I think if these entities come around and try to get enough of these tournaments, they can then package that and take it to like a Verizon and ask for a $5 million sponsorship. So I think there's more money to be had than just running tournaments. But at the end of the day, the question's still out there. How good is it for volleyball, or how good is it for youth sports?
Yeah.
Well, and has it raised costs or has it reduced costs? The whole spiel by all of these guys is that it reduces costs. We're going to reduce your insurance. We're going to reduce your uniform costs. We're going to reduce your shoe costs. We're going to reduce your ball costs with all this stuff. Have we seen any of that or not?
From our end, Mick, one of the things that, and this is not braggadocious, the fact is that Munciana is the oldest club in America. And so you got to imagine that our apparel deals were as good, if not better than most. Our ball deals were as good, if not better than most, just because of, lifetime relationships. And so some of these things that came in, I had a great conversation the other day with a gentleman who's been quite successful financially in business. And I told him that one of the things that was said was that when you're acquired, nothing will change. And he told me, he said, Michael, never have I seen an acquisition where nothing changed. There have been changes. Our fees, our fees appear to be different because we were one of the last to lump all the fees together. So a lot of clubs will have their participation fee, and then they'll have their tournament fees separate. We did that. Ours, we finally put them all together. So our fee structure hasn't increased much, if any. The tic-tac fees, the corporate fees, the fees on checking, the fees on the little things that we never had done before, those have increased. Have I seen a massive cost reduction? No, because like I said, because of our unification with the three-step guys, we had to surrender some of what we had earned over 50 years to kind of be in alignment with everyone else. And that's been somewhat of a pain point. The best part of the whole alignment, and whether it's Love or three-step or whomever, is there's been a nice collaboration. Anytime you can be with a group of people and a group of people that deem themselves friends, it's a good thing because you can get a lot done. But to answer your question on cost, there hasn't been a massive reduction. For us, there hasn't been a massive increase. We did change how we went about it, so it would appear to be that way, but not necessarily. They're paying one check now instead of 25 little ones. So, yeah.
So, you talked a little bit about three-step acquiring you and Love is trying to acquire. Is there a downside to this over time? Are we facing something that could be dangerous in terms of, these venture capital companies going under?
Well, going under is definitely a fear factor. I've looked at that a lot. When people go under, everything freezes, and that could be catastrophic to a club. To answer your question, my biggest thing that I think would worry me about this is one of the beauties of our sport has been everybody has their own approach. Everybody does things their own way, and cookie cutters, tend to stymie that kind of mindset or that thought process. And all of these separate entities have always kind of forged themselves into one beautiful element. And I think that sometimes when you get extremely corporate, you tend to hinder that kind of singular artistic approach, if that makes sense.
Max, I'll address this one to you. It's kind of in the same vein of venture capitalism and volleyball and the relationships and whatever. You've been approached, I think, multiple times by various entities. What factors do you weigh the most when it comes to, hey, I'm going to pull the trigger and have this group take over Mintonette, or I'm going to say no? Are there two or three big deals that you just feel strongly about, and they have to come to your direction before you would entertain any sort of buyout?
Yes. We didn't get that far with three-step. We have with Love, but even on like an NDA, I've had pushback. I think mainly because I've been my own boss for 25 years. I think that's first and foremost. On top of that, I'm a 51-year-old dad of three who has a 2-year-old. So, not knowing if 5 years down the road I'm not going to be doing the same thing is a little bit of a question mark for me. So that's kind of why I chose not to go that way 3 or 4 years ago. I felt like I had about 15 years left in me. Now I feel like I have 5. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to just take a hard look at offers and see what makes sense, and and then try to see if we can still drive the bus, because I think Mike is right on. The great thing about Munciana is what Wes and Mike do, and all the great coaches before him. We've had some great coaches come through ourselves, nothing like the tree in Munciana, but the individual idea of how to go about your business and then to collaborate on that, I think, is what the strength of our sport is, or any sport is. And to get into it with a corporate situation, I think drowns it out.
One thing, Mick, if I could add, one of the things that makes it a weird venture capitalist purchase is the fact that volleyball, by and large, is relationship based. It's very people oriented, and that makes it difficult. To Max's comment, running your own show is running your own show, and that's been one of the hard things, is to sit back and you're not in charge of this, you're not in charge of that. It would be very similar to any of the four of you having someone come in and tell you exactly how to run your college program, or how to run a practice, or that you need to do this, not that. And I'm not really sure. I spent time around all four of you. I don't think that would turn out real well for anyone.
Well, that begs the question, are these companies that are coming in, taking over, are they actually trying to influence your club with regards to how you teach, the systems you run, and that kind of thing? Or is it basically just financial management?
Ours is all financial. There's not been anyone step in and talk about how to direct or run practice. And I'll be honest, that's sewn into my soul. I think if that was on the table, regardless of monies or whatnot, I could not have gone with that. That would have been a deal changer for me.
Yeah, we haven't had, in the talks that I've had, nothing had anything to do with on the court stuff. So, and like Mike said, that's where the passion lies. And if you're taking away that from us, then what are we doing?
Well, Max, wasn't it true early on? I don't know if it's changed now, that Love Volleyball had a technical director, and their idea was it was going to be done, in all the clubs the same way. How they were teaching, how they were training. Has that changed?
So we haven't gotten that far. As much as I've talked, and I've reached out to a dozen clubs that are with Love, they're just not there yet. I think they're still trying to acquire and still try to, have their own. They're not driven in that way yet, because I don't think that they're where they need to be able to move forward. I have been told that it's going to be under one umbrella. It's going to be a lot of collaboration within the clubs that are in your city or your state. But at the end of the day, I think it would be really hard if you're taking out the practice plans from my hands to be able to write up. I still have to do our 10s today. I've got 14-year-old teams coming in about an hour and a half, and I haven't done their 90-minute practice yet. But you take that away from me, and then I'm twiddling my thumbs, and I think I'm bored to death. And then I don't really have a purpose, because that's what drives me, is what do we need to work on today? But again, like I said, I haven't gotten there, but I do think it's more that way for Love than it is for Three-Step. Three-Step, I think, is just the ability to run their business while they stay out of their way and let Mike do what he does.
Could I ask a question that's a little bit different than the direction we were going? But what do you think the difference is between where Love is going and where Three-Step is going, since you guys have talked to both?
Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I think Three-Step is very much like the U.S. model in regards to ownership and franchises and things like that, where Love is a league that they're trying to put influential players back in their home states or back in the states that they played college for, and to create interest there. But yeah, I answer your question. I don't have the answer.
Yeah, I think the only difference, Mick, to be honest, I find Three-Step to be very fiscal oriented. I thought Love was a little more physically oriented in the sense that they wanted to be involved in the physical part of the volleyball, the game itself. And I think that's the only separator. I'm not sure, financially where both stand at this point, but I think venture capitalism is in the game. I think it's here to stay. I look at what's going on in basketball and some of the other entities across our country, and there's been these flare-ups all over. Now, how deeply involved are they going to be, or how long will they be a talking point? I don't know. I do know that, we entered into a deal, and so far the deal has been what it was said to be. Now, there's been some things that I haven't liked, but that's corporate. That's corporate. But the good news is for me that it's never once interrupted my on the court presence. And at the end of the day, I've never touted myself as a businessman, but I have touted myself as a teacher, and I just, as long as I'm allowed to do the gym, I think I'm okay.
Okay, let's go a different direction then. Let's talk about your kids in college and college coaches. Are the college coaches changing in that they're coming to you to recruit your former players who may be at one institution and are in the portal going another way? Or are they interested in recruiting your players right away to try to get them into the school and spend 4.5 years with them, developing them and getting them going?
I think for us, it's fifth-year seniors mainly. When college coaches are reaching out, hey, your kid's in the portal. What is she looking for? That type of thing, to get a little bit of background so they have a little bit more of an upper, an advantage to recruit them to their school. But I've also had as coaches go as far as, hey, does so-and-so want to get out of that train wreck of a program? And that's with them not getting in the portal. That's with me, not having heard from them. So it's amazing where we've gone in just a short amount of time over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Max. It's mainly those kids that are later on in their careers. Most of the time when I get questions, it's about work ethic. It's about the kids' upside. Even even though they've got numbers and tape on the kid, they want to know a little bit more inside information. I tend, I stay out of the day-to-day recruiting part. We have someone that does that, but I will be honest. Most of the portal calls will come to me, and they want to know what this kid's about. And I've had people call and say, "Is she interested in staying?" And I don't entertain that very much. Because once those kids are gone, they're doing their thing. Now, do kids reach back out to me and let me know they're frustrated? Yeah, but by and large, the portal has impacted us more from a top end, watching where our kids go, because kids at one point were going to be big time Power 5 kids are sliding down a little bit because, for lack of better terms, free agency.
Yeah, that kind of follows my question. Are you guys, as you're advising your players about recruiting, do you ask them to look at what's happening with portal players going to the schools that are recruiting them?
Well, the bigger problem is the number of kids that will commit to a place and then kind of look at you and go, well, if it doesn't work, I'll just take this because it's a scholarship. And if it doesn't work, I'll just go in the portal. And these kids aren't aware of the fact that there's about 800 kids that are still in the portal. They just live in the portal. I think that it will come down to kids looking at people's portal tendencies. I think people are going to start to look. You'd be stupid to not look as an incoming athlete to not see what these guys do. These guys that are going to bring in 3 portals a year, and negate your first 2 years. I think that's going to become an issue. I think we're not there yet. But my biggest problem is the sheer fact that people think that they can just go to college and then jump into the portal. If things aren't cool, we're hitting the portal and we're out.
I think before the portal, we were looking at that trend already, right? 3 or 4 years past, what has been the tendency for kids to stay or leave? And that typically was a sign of culture and what they were going to get as they chose that school or another school. So, but I do think, it's trending towards, 3rd or 4th year kids versus 17-year-old kids looking at schools. Because like Mike said, free agency, they're looking for starters, not somebody that can come in and develop into one. 9 times out of 10 when they're reaching out to us about kids that are in the portal.
Well, think about it. You got a kid now that you guarantee, exactly that they can handle college rigors, academics. That they have real numbers. They're playing against other college teams. They have real film. They're playing against other teams. And they don't have any kind of crazy relationship or they wouldn't be willing to leave. I mean, so those guys check all the boxes. And so, it's going to become interesting to see what happens. It's just weird to me that if you think when you four first got into it, transfer was kind of taboo. I mean, those guys were most often people wondered if they were a damaged product. And now it's the flavor of the day.
Yeah, that's true. That's the way it was in my last 2 years.
Yeah.
Here's the other big one. Do you see, is NIL starting to show its face with your recruited kids?
Yeah, I can answer that. That's 100. Yes, 100%. I think I'm not so sure, Tommy, that NIL is not going to start showing its face in club. It's getting a little crazy. I talked to a guy the other day, and he was talking to me, and I said, "Yeah, I told him I had an NIL deal when I was in high school." And he said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I got a letter jacket." And it's getting out of control, and it is going to play a big deal. And you talk about a part of our sport that has no guardrails. NIL. I talked to a college coach the other day, and he said he had to get off the phone to go to a compliance meeting. I said, "You guys still have those?" I mean, why would you still even have a compliance meeting? I don't know, man. I think it is coming. I think it's a big deal with our kids, and they hear about it.
Oh yeah.
They'll talk all the way through the club. Who got what.
Let me address Max for just a quick minute here, because you became my personal hero when you said you're going to go out and coach 10-year-olds later on today. There is no way I could venture into that territory. So, I would have them all crying in about 30 minutes. So, but a general question to both. What I hear you saying is, I'll rephrase it. The recruiting process as it currently exists is probably not going to impact your top players, but that your second, third, fourth best player on a team that used to be highly recruited, I would think college coaches are going to be more, rather than recruiting this quote second line player, I'll take my chances in the portal. I mean, do you see the same thing where your second, not your All-Americans, are really being impacted by the current process as it's unfolding?
I mean, our top 3 or 4, they're going to Power Fives, and they're happy with the decision they're making. But getting back to the NIL, the rich are just going to continue richer. And, the teams that win back to back to back, those teams, you look at the conferences now, like in Division II, you can tell who has 8 full scholarships and who doesn't, because they're always up there. And I think that's going to be the same when it comes to Division I with NIL or getting rid of scholarships and having an unlimited one altogether. But
No, I do see a little bit. We still have kids going to Power Fives. The biggest difference is a lot of those kids that are going away, they're still going away, but they're not all getting 4 years. There's an awful lot of 2-year options being doled out because of the portal. I think that's part of it. I think that there's an awful lot of 2-year deals being dished out because of NIL. Because I can give you a 2-year scholarship and I can cover the rest with NIL. And so, to say the landscape is shifted would be a massive understatement. And to say that it's ever going to go back to what it was it's not going to happen. But, I look at it, from a volleyball standpoint, I think it's dangerous precedent. I think there's still a lot to be uncovered with NIL. And, you guys were talking about venture capitalism. This is equal but opposite. This is going to be an issue that if they can't get it under control, they'll lose everything. And, when we first got into this, we think about I was talking the other day to Kelly Sheffield, and he was asking me about the recruiting calendar. And I said they shouldn't have one. They shouldn't have one, because at the end of the day, the recruiting calendar falls on 2 of the major holidays. So college coaches couldn't go out anyhow. But at the end of the day, we put together a recruiting calendar to kind of protect and keep it even. It was to keep everything even so that some people wouldn't go out and go crazy. And there was a big haves and have not in college volleyball. Well, whether you like it or not, now there is. There is. NIL and everything else has allowed for this thing to really become a major league and a minor league kind of system. And so I just think that, we shouldn't worry about anything anymore that's going to keep everything balanced, because the balance has been lost for a while now.
Yeah, there's not much to say other than smile and laugh about it, because you can't control anything. Kids are leaving better programs to go to other programs that are not as strong, and that spells volumes of dollars changing hands. So it's almost hard, and I take on the recruiting for our club because it's one of the biggest passions for me. It's we're a recruiting club. Our goal is to get our kids to college. We're not about winning, but it's a product of both. And so we've had the luxury of having both. But it's hard now to sit in with the family and talk about, what 4 years is going to look like from now.
You know what? I should do a show and interview you 4 guys and ask the point blank question. And all I would say is, how often do you thank God you're not doing it today? Because the bottom line is all 4 of you guys were crazy demanding. You got into guys, you held people accountable, you were rugged. None of those things work today. You look at a kid and tell her, Mick, she's not good enough to start, and she's gone tomorrow. And so, when Max and I start our Not Master Coaching podcast, you 4 guys are coming on right off the bat, and I'm going to hit you with those questions. How you would deal with NIL, how you would deal with transfer portal, because I think that would be entertaining if you guys were unbridled.
Well, I think that pretty much sums it up for us, group. I'd like to thank Max and Mike both for coming on, because I think you really were, had some great insightful responses to the questions. I really appreciate both of you taking the time out today, in your schedules. I know, Max, we got to cut you loose so you can plan your practice. But thanks very much for being on with us.
We appreciate it,
guys.
Thank you very much, guys. Great talking with you.
Good job, guys.
Thank you, guys.
All right, before we transition into the buzz reaction, let's take a minute to hear from our friends and sponsor, S&A Sports Group, about one of their outstanding volleyball net systems.
When you're talking about volleyball equipment, Collegiate 4000 is our benchmark, and it's our most popular system.
At 22 and 27 pounds for the post weight, it's very easy to carry around. And I've seen middle schools as well as high school teams be able to set it up in under 5 minutes consistently. It uses our international net, which is a really unique net design. It doesn't slide back and forth on the top and bottom ropes. You actually hook the 4 points up, tighten everything up, and you're ready to play. Regardless of your sleeve size, whether they're 4-inch, 3.5, or 3-inch, we can modify our posts to fit that. They'll drop right in with a lifetime warranty on the post and a lifetime warranty on the winch. We're covering all of the real major components of the net system. We have infinite net height adjustability on the slide rail, from men's height all the way down to tennis if needed. And it's also infinitely upgradable. You don't really have to buy posts again. You can always just upgrade the rails and keep on going with whatever new technology we come out with. So if you're looking for a lightweight and versatile net system that's a snap to set up, I wouldn't look any further than the Collegiate. If you're interested, please give me a call. I'd love to talk with you.
Now let's transition into Buzz Reaction segment. This is where the master coaches discuss and react to the answers the guests have just given us in the weekly Buzz. So let's go ahead and start. Mick, I know that you're chomping at the bit here because we were just really getting into it there at the end, and I'm sure you have a number of comments about that.
Well, I didn't get to ask my final question, which I was really excited about asking what are their real problems that we're overlooking and we haven't talked about. But they were pretty open, don't you think, about talking about their involvement with the pro groups and with the people that are trying to get into the sport and wealth management and some of these areas. I thought we could have had about 6 different shows here because the guys were willing to be open and honest and talk to us about what's really going on. We can't get the college coaches many times to get into that because of recruiting and all the things that go with, telling it like it is. So I thought there's a lot of questions that weren't answered. I thought we got a lot of good answers. But I'd like to do this again, and they wouldn't dare ask us those questions. We'd be all over them.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot. Mike really wanted to talk about NIL.
Yeah,
he's primarily in a Big Ten area, so it shows you that conference is probably the most active in terms of how they're using NIL in recruiting, which they're not supposed to. But but I can see because the club environment often has a lot of gossiping and drama and that kind of stuff going through parents and everything. And I bet once they start talking about NIL deals, man, those things can get blown up.
Jim?
Well, yeah, I agree with Mick. I thought both were very forthcoming with how they feel, which is refreshing in this day and age. It seems to me that, and again, I'm in the left field bleachers. I'm not involved in negotiations, that the venture capital companies, they want the events, and the events is where the money is. Running a club, it's break even, maybe a little bit above that. The events is where the money is. I'm just wondering, looking 5-7 years down the road, will, for example, 3-Step, will they start running their own national championship and be a competitor with AAUs and USAV nationals? So it'll be interesting because as we all know, the money's a big deal, and that's how Triple Crown got started. As Mick mentioned, they're paying coaches to come and recruit.
Well, didn't Tom tell us that Triple Crown was looking at the NIT, at developing their own NIT for college? There's an event right there, right?
Oh, I think they already are.
They already are doing it. And I think, you got to remember about Triple Crown, before they even got into volleyball, they were the largest softball event group in the world, and they still are. And so those guys really know what they're doing. And I, you know, what you're saying, Jim, I think is true. Is these venture capital companies want to come in, they want to get events, they want to get clubs that have a lot of revenue stream, and they probably are looking for real estate as well.
Yeah. Well, the funny that Jim brought that up, because actually on one of our shows about a year and a half ago, right, Mick?
Yep.
You know, we were trying to ask the different venture capital groups that were coming in, you know, what's really their motive, and because Mick felt like it was just the events. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, they're making some money off of the club, but they know the home run is going to be running these big events. And I think Three Steps already running some events, and Triple Crown, though they haven't gotten into buying clubs, I think they went right to the events right away.
Well, if you don't have to invest by buying clubs and you can still get the events, that's a home run, isn't it? I mean, that's the way I look at it. And if you run the numbers, I heard Mike, I think, say this is $1 billion business. Well, guess what? It's a $17
billion business
per year. Think about that. That's 17 times what he said there. And those are numbers that are coming out of the wealth management groups that have run the actuarials on this. So, you know, I don't know, guys.
So I have a question for you guys. What is USA Volleyball doing in this environment? Are they just sit back and watch and see what happens? Are they going to try to take more control over qualifiers and events? What are they going to do?
Who's laughing over there?
What I was told, and this is interesting, what I was told is that all the NGBs have been told or counseled by the USOC to get out of as many of these things as possible and be only involved in running the international Olympic events. And I, as critical as I've been of USA Volleyball, sitting back just like you were alluding to, I was told by a pretty good source that this is coming from the top, and they're actually being encouraged to not get in things where they can get sued so much. So much of the money is going down the drain in lawsuits with parents, with kids, not with Olympic athletes necessarily. Not in the Olympic scene necessarily. So I would think maybe we should try to get some people on the show to talk to us about that, to see where the USOC is coming from and how that fits into the FIVB and all of the international federations. And if this is not something that's coming from the top, instead of maybe the executive director just not pursuing things the way we would like to see them done.
You know, if indeed NGBs are being recommended to go the direction that you just described, Mick, and they get out of events, the financial impact for USAV would be pretty earth-shattering. And in essence, the USAV could be run by two people working out of their house. And these venture capitalists, they'll run all the tournaments, which maybe that's the direction the USOC wants people to go, wants NGBs to go. But you're right. It'd be interesting to get somebody who's willing to answer some tough questions to start plotting a direction for the future.
Well, you know, again, I've been told that there are only 4 people or 2 or 3, 4 people in the national office for USA Volleyball. And the executive director lives with Bob in Philadelphia. I don't know if, Bob, you have dinner with him every night or what, but
well, the other entities that could get hurt by that are the regions, because there are certain regions that own events, and they rely on those events to have, provide all the operating costs for what they do.
Yeah. So
I think one of the things that was good about the show and interviewing both Max and Mike was, their passion for teaching and coaching and working with the kids is still there, regardless of all this other stuff that's going on. And I think that's real important. We don't want to be losing that.
Yeah, I loved Mike's answer about that. I loved his answer about, if these big companies are coming in and going to try to impact how they coach and what they do on the court, he doesn't like it.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that these two clubs we interviewed today, club directors, and obviously there's other successful clubs out there. One of the reasons they are so successful is they just work at it hard. And I think, obviously ballpark numbers, I think 80% of the clubs out there are recreational in nature. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the other 20%, they start the season with the idea we want to win national championships. And I think the two guys we interviewed today, they're in that 20%. They work hard at it, and their goals are pretty lofty.
Okay. Anything else about the show today that kind of stood out for any of you, other than the chaos that seems to be even plaguing clubs now with the portal and NIL?
Yeah, I thought we could have gone another hour just talking about those two things. I felt like Max might have held back a little bit, but Mike certainly didn't.
No, Mike was great. He was, but both the guys were great. But I think Mike was starting to get into, what reality is looking like for them at Munciana right now.
Well, and don't you think if we're going to solve some of these problems, people have got to quit being worried about who they're going to offend and that they might lose a kid in the club because they said something that was true to their heart or honest. I think the kind of discussion we had with both guys really is some of the most open comments and opinions that we've had in the show, Bob, in 2 or 3 years. And we can't get college coaches to speak like this because we know what the reason is and the outcomes. But if more people would open up, I think people would start to examine these issues and come to conclusions, or at least come to with ideas of how to solve some of these situations and develop a structure that it's going to work. We don't want to spend all of our time going around the problem when we could maybe solve some of these problems and spend more time with our sport getting better.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. And I think we as people who are out of the game, along with people who are willing to speak openly about it, really need to talk about why kids play sports, why the college volleyball or college athletic experience is so important to young people, rather than the money issues and, the things that and what conference you're in. They need to talk about the real lessons, I think, and talk about how important those things really are.
Jim, last thoughts?
Last thoughts. I just think the direction college athletics is going for a majority of the schools is not sustainable financially. They if you're outside the Power Four now, how can you afford to participate? All the costs are going up and the revenue is shrinking. I'm just the next 10 years are going to be very interesting. I think it's a house of cards that's ready to collapse on itself for a lot of college programs.
I just read what the athletic director at Texas said last night. He held an open forum. Anybody could come. And he talked about the football players having to walk 800 yards from practice to the locker room. And that was taking up too much of their time during the day to walk back and forth on the 800 yards. So therefore, they're going to take the social one of the departments that deals with, I think, teaching, and razz that area and put a new bubble up for indoor practice right next to the locker room, so they would have more time to study. Now, and then he said they're going to build a new 5,000 seat arena for volleyball. When the volleyball team's already averaging about 5,400. So I'm thinking the only way they're going to get their money back on that is to raise prices of tickets, right? I mean, why build 5,000 seat arena if you're already drawing 5,000? It just is. You're right. It's not sustainable for most people, and only a few schools can even talk about doing it. Oh, and the last thing he said, this is the best ever. When SEC schools come into our stadium now, we will have a scoreboard that's going to replace the one we have now that will let them know that Texas is in the SEC. And I thought, is that scoreboard going to go all the way around the top of the Coliseum or what? I don't know.
Well, I think one of the things that we're going to get into next week that we kind of left off a little bit on the show was NIL again, but just a different approach. And I think it's going to be pretty exciting, for people to hear about this new company and their approach to NIL. And, so stay tuned for next week. It's going to be a very interesting show, and it will give you a little bit more insights into NIL and what's going on in college athletics.